It's the chair conspiracy. All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to call to order the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District Board of Directors meeting for Tuesday, June the 7th. And we will start with a salute to the flag. Chief Kettering, would you lead it? Actually, yes, Chief Kettering. I wanted to give you a little to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's one of those kinds of days for me, Chief. I'm fooling with you. I apologize. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Von Hartung, Chair.
Here.
Alexis Hill, Vice Chair. Here. Bob Lucy.
Here.
Kitty Jung appears to be absent. Jeannie Herman.
Here.
Fire Chief Charles Moore.
Here.
Deputy District Attorney Wade Carner.
Here.
And I'm Chief Deputy Clerk Kathy Smith. You have a quorum, sir.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us into public comment. Item number 3, Chief.
Item 3 is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. The district will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments are to be made to the Board of Fire Commissioners as a whole.
Thank you, Chief. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment?
We do not.
Okay. Seeing no public comment, I will close item number 3. That takes us now to item number 4, Chief. Commissioners, Fire Chiefs announcements.
Commissioners, Fire Chiefs announcements, requests for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda. I have no announcements, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Commissioners, anyone?
Chairman, I do actually have one comment I'd like to bring up.
Mr. Reese?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, we had a Board of Health meeting a couple weeks, 2 weeks back, and during that discussion, there were some issues that pertained to the rate increase for REMSA and their ability to charge insurance companies more for their services. And one of the challenges that we discussed during that board meeting is that the frustrations that REMSA is experiencing as an organization is their ability to collect, and due to the franchise agreement with the District Board of Health. And I would ask that this Fire Commission take it under consideration that for future references that we participate a little bit more and send either letters of support for revitalizing or changing the franchise agreement or working with, because as you know, the county and the hospitals, the local hospitals can bill the county for indigent services. Currently, the REMSA cannot, due to the franchise agreement, the way it's drafted, and now it's been drafted about 35 years ago, and it creates challenges for REMSA to collect on indigent services and indigent people within the community. And we see them responding not only within, they help obviously tremendously in the unincorporated county and both the city municipalities, but they respond to our CARES campus and a number of different things within the community. And when we talk about EMS and we talk about dispatch, and I know we'll talk about that later in the agenda today, but it's something that I feel really passionate about, that this Fire Commission take on some discussions about how we can better improve not just service with our ground transport service provider, but also as a community. What can we do in regards to regionalization for EMS? What can we do for regionalization for fire? And what can we do for regionalization with dispatch? And see how functionally we can work together as a community, not only with our labor unions, but with our other municipalities and our executive staff to really move the needle on that. Ultimately, the board did approve a modest increase allowance for REMSA. It's still with operating costs and gas and service costs. we anticipate better fire service and better transport for our unincorporated county, and one of the challenges is staffing. But if we can't, if they cannot bill enough to support those staff increases, it'll be a death of 1,000 cuts. And I don't want to see that happen. So I think there's a grander discussion. Chairman and Vice Chair, I would hope that you would participate in those types of conversations with the chief and the board as a whole to see what we can do and do it in short order and move quickly on this, because the longer we wait and kick the can down the road, we truly aren't addressing the elephant in the room, which is the lack of service. And ultimately what happens is the community suffers from that. So that would be my request to this board in the next 6 months, to really work on some issues before the legislative session and to do that on a grander scale. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lucy. Anyone else before I chime in? Okay. Yeah, Chief, I happen to agree with this. It's been years since REMSA's had any increases, and if REMSA fails because they cannot recover their costs, I mean, they're a company, whether they're a nonprofit or not, they still have to be, we'll call it profitable, in order to grow and serve the region. It could be catastrophic for us regionally. And so let's talk about what we would bring back and how we might approach the DBOH and how we can potentially assist and support REMSA and support this effort. Because I think it's incumbent upon us, because we in the unincorporated area and sometimes in the city of Sparks are the first responders, and we've got to deal with those issues. And if REMSA cannot recover their costs, it again could be catastrophic for us. So let's talk about that and bring something back potentially even at the next meeting.
Very good.
All right, and if you would coordinate with Commissioner Lucy with respect to how he'd like to see the agenda item styled, and then let me know, and then you and I will work backwards on it. Anyone else? Okay, we will close item number 4. That takes us now to item number 5. Chief.
Item 5 is National Weather Service 2022 Summer Weather Outlook, presented by Chris Smallcombe, who joins us via Zoom. And Mr. Smallcombe?
Good morning. Can you hear me? See me?
We can't see you, but we can certainly hear you.
The voice from above. There we go. All right.
There you are.
I am. Okay. Apologies for not being there in person. I'm working an operational shift, so unfortunately, kind of keeps me here on the home turf. So I'll go ahead and get started just to keep us on time here, and share my screen. So give me one moment here. Oh, there goes my lights. That's just fantastic. But as long as I'm still presenting something, then I think we're good to go. You can see me there giving one of my world-class weather briefings with the 8-ball and the rotary dial phone. There you go. So so we use the latest technology here at the Weather Service Arena, and I'm waving my hand at the light to turn back on again. There we go. All right. So, we had an exceptionally wet October and December, and then the atmosphere just shut off in January through March. And I've been here 15 years. I have colleagues who've been here longer. We've never seen the atmosphere just turn off like that after just such a busy start to the winter season. So, of course, if you asked me what fire season was going to be like on January 1st, I would have had a radically different answer than I do for you in this presentation. So April saw some snow, but the drought still expanded. It just was too little too late. So what does summer have in store for us? This is always a question that I get from a lot of our fire chiefs, is how many red flag days did we have last year? Just for context and everything. So here you go, answering that question. So last year here in the Sierra Front Fire Weather Zone, which extends from basically Doyle to Reno down to Carson City and Minden, we ended up having 22 days last summer that were under a red flag warning, which is not the record, but it's certainly up there in terms of the number of days over the last, say, decade or so. The average is about 16 or so each summer. We had 22 last year. So another big year for windy days and also those dry lightning days that we have sometimes. And then for reference, here's the Tahoe zone and then Mono County, kind of Mammoth Lakes zone that I get asked about quite frequently. Also a big year, but not the record-setting year last year in terms of the number of red flag days. All right, so the story of winter 21-22 is, of course, we had that monster storm that kicked everything off at the end of October. We had 3 inches of rain at the Reno airport. We had 8 inches of rain in Verdi. That was 40% of our annual average total in one storm. So, man, we thought we were off to the races. But you can see here on the snowpack chart, this is a chart showing you what the snow water content is in the Truckee River Basin. It bumped up, but it didn't do a whole lot because it was mainly rain with that event. But that was a crucial event for us. We needed that because it moistened the ground up a bit. So when we do have our snowpack and then it melts off, it won't just go into a big dry sponge. It'll instead melt off into the creeks and streams. But of course, that assumes that we had a normal winter. Well, go on to November, very dry. One of the warmest Novembers we've had on record. And then we hit December, which was the third snowiest month at the Central Sierra Snow Lab up at Donner Pass in 40 years of record. So we had lots of snow, both in the mountains and then down here in the valleys as well. You can see just 2 big surges there in mid and late December with snow. So we were like, wow, this is great. The drought is done, fire season, should be a lot better, whatever. And then, of course, we stopped having storms. We had actually a 55-day streak where we had no snow water content gain in the Eastern Sierra as a whole, and that's a record dating back to 1981 where we haven't seen that. So just amazing. So we went from above normal to below normal. The April storms were good. We'll take what we can get. The cooler temperatures stopped the slide toward probably a record early melt out on the snow and actually added maybe about 10 to 15 points on the Truckee River water forecast in terms of percent of normal. So that did help get us a little bit closer to normal. So it was a very weird winter. Absolutely, again, somebody who's been here 15 years, like, whoa, this is definitely one that went from one end to the other. So the other question I'm getting a lot lately, has this spring been more windy than normal? And if you think so, you're right. It has been more windy than normal. And so this is a chart showing you the average wind speeds at the Reno airport dating back to 1997. So it's the average sustained wind speed for the period April 1st through May 9th of each of those years. The green line is average. The blue bars are each year. 2022 really does stand out. It's actually windier than normal, but also windier than the last 4 to 5 years that we've had. So yes, it has been breezier than normal. And some of that is with those storms that we got in April. So let's take a look with all that as the scene setting. Let's take a look at the weather outlook and what that might mean for fire season coming up here. All of you know that I do a lot of running, way more than I probably should, but I have fun doing it. And so here's some flowers up on Peavine. I highly encourage you to head up there if you have a chance. It's still quite green up there and lots of wildflowers going on up on the mountain. So here's our summer outlook for June, July, and August. And the thing that just absolutely, I'm sure your eyes are drawn to, is this massive red area of above normal on the temperature outlook for the western U.S. this summer. But more specifically for our area, I like to take it and look at pie charts, because when we're looking months in advance, I can't tell you it's going to be 5 degrees above normal, or we're going to have a record number of 100-degree days. That's just something beyond our capabilities. But what I can tell you is kind of where is the atmosphere leaning towards? And so temperatures, it's a heavy, heavy favorite toward above normal temperatures for this summer. In fact, you could add up the near and above normal and come up with an 84% chance that our region is at or above normal in temperatures for this coming summer. So a heavy lean there. The precipitation is really anything is possible at this point. There's no clear signal on the monsoon. How active is that going to be? How many thunderstorm days are we going to get this year? Just no real clear signal. And it's actually not too unusual for a monthly weather forecast this far out for us to be kind of equal chances on that. So that warmer than normal, that does mean it does increase the odds of us seeing more heat waves. And to that point, If you haven't checked out your air conditioner or swamp cooler yet, you might want to, because late this week we are in for our first hot temperatures of the summer. In fact, we're contemplating potentially issuing a heat advisory for Friday. Could get close to 100 degrees here in Reno on Friday, which is close to a record for the earliest 100-degree day. Not quite. The record actually is today, back in 2013, but pretty close. So get ready for that. So, of course, for this summer, heat waves are more likely, probably an earlier onset to fire season, just because things are going to dry out, heat up, dry out more, dry the vegetation out. And of course, the drought would persist or even intensify. And of course, that has water supply ramifications for especially a lot of our friends in the rural areas that depend on wells and things like that. So on the preset, no favorite outcome means really anything is on the table at this point. We could have a busy thunderstorm season, or it could be relatively quiet thunderstorm season. So speaking of water supply, this is looking at the percent of normal of the water coming down our rivers and streams from the snowpack. So for the Truckee River, we're looking at about 69% of normal coming down through Ferret that goes into Reno, and 57% on the Carson River. 2% of normal on the Humboldt River. And of course, that's outside the county, but I just think it goes to telling you just how bad the situation is over there on the Rye Patch Reservoir. Very little, if any, water is going to be making it to the reservoir. So I did want to point this out. This is looking at the stream flow graphics for the Galena Creek. This is one I'm definitely familiar with getting some water out of on my longer runs. And so on the blue graph, it's showing you the instantaneous flows on the creek back to October 1st. So we're looking at this past winter and spring. The yellow little dots are the average flows. So of course, the big storms in October stands out, even little blips here in November, and then again in December where we had enough rainfall. But I want to draw your eyes over to the right-hand side of the graphic. You notice that the flows were well above normal for a multi-week period in late March and early April. That's because we didn't have any storms and we were melting off our snowpack a lot earlier than normal. And so then that translates to below normal flows going into April and into May, because again, we're peeling off that snowpack sooner than normal. That is a trend that we're seeing over the years, and something that a lot of the long-term projections have shown, that the snowpack will melt off sooner than it historically has. And we're even seeing evidence of that just year to year here in the region. So the drought impacts to rural water resources are a real big concern going into this season with a relative lack of moisture from this past winter. From my understanding, and of course you'd have to talk to Tumwa, things are in good shape there just because of the reservoir system. But for more rural areas that depend more on local water sources, that could be a concern. The snow melt out is early. Heat wave later this week will definitely kick out some of that snow. And I think this is really important from a firefighting aspect, is those seasonal creeks and ponds are going to be drying out a lot sooner than normal this summer. And I know we like to use those for wildfire response, but come July and August, some of the smaller ones may or may not be available just because of the lack of moisture that we've had. So for fire season coming up here, there's definitely a handful of things that we like to look at. One is the drought. We are in a severe drought. It's a multi-year drought. Northern parts of Washoe County are actually in what's called extreme drought, even worse than normal up toward Gerlach. But here in the Reno, Truckee, Meadows area, closer to that severe drought, still pretty gnarly. But on the flip side, we did have that October storm and then the December storms that actually ended up making our precipitation above normal, and that increased the soil moisture. As I mentioned earlier, that sponge kind of absorbed a lot of that rain that we got in October. So the soil moisture is above normal. So these are some competing factors here. So the long-term drought does tend to curtail new grass growth, all that cheatgrass that drives a lot of fires here in western Nevada. But at the same time, that drought does stress the existing vegetation, especially our larger fuels like timber and juniper, which tends to favor then having those large kind of giant plume-dominated fires. So think Caldor, think Tamarack, think Dixie, those things that look like bombs went off. Unfortunately, when you have really drought-stressed big vegetation like that, that favors those kind of large fires like that. So that doesn't sound too good. Now, the above normal precip and soil moisture that we had does tend to increase that fine field grass growth. So there's some competing factors there. And so this is the unknown, is There is more cheatgrass out there than there has been the last couple years, but how much? And is it enough that we start carrying larger fires in the region? So that's still kind of TBD at this point, a little bit of a wild card, especially in the lower elevations here in western Nevada. And then, of course, the big wild card is the number of thunderstorm days or those red flag days. Those are big drivers in how busy a fire season we have. So the official Predictive Services outlook, this is June. The red areas are above normal. The white areas are near normal fire activity. Unfortunately, I wish I could zoom in more on this, but the maps that are available online, this is the best I can get. So there's June, here's July, here's August, and here's September. So we only got 4 months here, but the key message is they are going above normal on fire activity for the Sierra, including around Tahoe and even into northern parts of Washoe County. But for locally, it is near normal. But by and large, even near to above normal fire season is still potentially pretty significant. So I think, unfortunately, we probably are in for another busy season, especially in the in the mountain areas. The Great Basin, we'll have to see how the grass fuel crop does in terms of providing a source for fires. That third point there is I really loathe having to talk about this. Again, as you know, as an ultra runner, I depend on being outside for long periods of time to be able to train. And when the smoke comes in, it really curtails that. And there's, of course, the mental health aspects that go with that. So I think bottom line, we need to go into the summer being prepared for another smoke season, because even if the fires aren't local, if they're in Northern California, we could still have pretty significant air quality impacts from those fires. And so to that point, I wanted to touch on here a couple more slides before I finish. We do provide extensive support to the community for wildfire smoke days. We partner with the Air Quality Management District and others at the state and local levels to keep the community informed. We brief schools, the Washoe School District, the airports, visibility, fire services, also visibility forecasting there for air tankers and water drops, and smoke, of course, affects health and air quality and everything else going on. So we have high resolution smoke models that run 48 hours into the future using new fire detections from satellite, meteorological variables. So we have some really good tools at our disposal to be able to predict where is that smoke going to go, potentially how bad is it going to be. The one caveat to that is, especially past 24 hours into the future, the predictability of it isn't quite as good, just because what a new fire starts to do, how active is the fire, what about existing smoke, is the model really picking up on all the smoke that's trapped in valleys. So that's where we as forecasters come in and try and diagnose and change what the model is saying to provide the best forecasts we can. But we got some really good tools to help support the community preparing for those big smoke days. And of course, we keep everybody informed via our freak out chart briefings and all that jazz. So I want to finish up with a couple nuggets here, and you're going to read that quote and you're going to be like, wow, he finally admitted what I've known for years, that they get paid to be wrong. Well, if you look at the quote, all weather forecasts are wrong, but some are useful. If you look at any given weather forecast, especially highly detailed ones, you're always going to find something that was not correct about it. Ooh, those winds were way stronger, or that temperature was 5 degrees off. You're always going to find something. And we've kind of come to terms with that as meteorologists, that the atmosphere that has a predictability limit to it. But can we make a forecast good enough where people, and more importantly, public safety agencies like our fire partners, make good decisions based off that weather information? So making a good enough forecast to make good weather-based decisions. So that's our goal in the Weather Service. And so we do that via not just providing a spot weather forecast, but also providing some extra information to help assess confidence levels, providing potential worst case scenarios and threshold probabilities of like, oh, hey, what are the odds the winds are going to hit that red flag criteria? Is it 80% or is it 40%? So we have the tools now to be able to provide that information. And so that's what we provide our fire partners in addition to the normal forecast. So Last here, I do want to review the fire weather alerts you're going to see. These, if you've lived here long enough, you know about these, but especially for folks new to the area. A fire weather watch, that's what we issue multiple days in advance when we have kind of middle of the road confidence that we could see a critical fire weather situation. And that definition of that is wind gusts above 30 miles an hour and humidity less than 15% for 3 or more hours, or numerous thunderstorms with a lot of lightning and potential for new fire starts. So we issue that as a multi-day heads up for the fire partners, medium confidence that we could see those conditions. And if you're a fan of the freak out chart, that's the emoji that goes with that. Now, once our confidence gets to high, we issue the red flag warning. So that's when we have at least an 80% confidence that we're going to see those critical fire weather conditions. And it depends where you are, but of course, roughly 10 to 20 of these red flag days each year. And we try and issue these about 1 to 3 days in advance. So the predictability is pretty good. It's good enough to help our fire partners make some staffing decisions ahead of time. And there's the freak out emoji that you might see with that. Now, last but not least is what we call the PDS red flag warning, particularly dangerous situation red flag warning. This is the worst of the worst. And we're looking at extremely high confidence in a high-end situation occurring, very strong winds, low humidity, and the fuels are historically dry. These are the cases where if a fire starts, it spreads so rapidly that evacuations may have to take place in a matter of minutes kind of situation. So we've been working with emergency managers and our fire partners to, when we issue these PDS red flag warnings, that it emphasizes the evacuation preparedness piece in terms of messaging. Now, we may only issue one of these a year, maybe one every other year. We want these to be really special events where it really captures people's attention and gets people to act. So we, everybody has to be on board with this. We coordinate with fire partners and everybody else to make sure that we all see the same thing when it comes to these PDS red flag warnings. Now, a lot of these do tend to occur in the shoulder season. So like this might be a September or October where we have an overlap between our fire season and the beginnings of our winter storm / high wind season. So that's probably the most likely time frame you'd see one of these PDS red flags, but they could, in theory, happen any time of year. And of course, there's the freak out emoji that you might see with that. So I think that's what I got there. I'm going to go ahead and hop back to screen here and stop sharing. And thank you for the invite, and thank you for your attention. I'll take any questions.
So, Chris, I'm going to start out here. Do you know where that quote came from? All weather forecasts are wrong. Do you know what the original quote was by chance?
I don't. It's something that we've used in our agency for a year or two now.
You can look it up. It's George Box. He was a British statistician. All models are wrong. Some models are useful. So he was born in the very early part of the 20th century. I think it was 1919. And he was maybe one of the greatest statistical minds in the 20th century. So we taught you something today.
No, and that's fantastic, and you always do. I always enjoy that. It's a really compelling quote, and when I use it, people initially are taken aback. They're like, "Oh wow, he finally admitted that." Yeah. But it really opens up a conversation about how can we make weather forecasts useful, even if they're not perfect. Yeah.
It's just a model, and that's in fact, I remind my engineers of that all the time when they say, well, we've modeled this or we've modeled that, and it's in fact, I think Mr. Hauk has heard me say that. All models are wrong, some are useful. Questions for Mr. Smallcombe? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Chris. It's an easy day for you.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. And again, thanks for the invite. Always good to be there. Yep.
Thank you so much. Okay, Chief, I see that we have Mr. Hauk here. Mr. Hauk, or did you come to give us some Did you come to give us some information on our water supply? That takes us to item number 6. Chief, forgive me.
Go ahead, Mr. Hauk.
Bill Hauk for the record, Truckee, Meadows Water Authority. Going to give you a brief water supply outlook today, talk about river flows. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. Next slide, please. What am I looking at? I don't have a clicker. It's broken.
Is it broken?
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Is the clicker
So,
not working?
key takeaways for this year, as Chris mentioned, a lot of my slides were probably similar to his. We came into this year with snowpack in excess of 225% of normal. Then we had basically the 3 driest months on record. Our official snowpack on April 1st ended up being 60% of normal. We did get a significant boost in the second, third weeks of April, as Chris mentioned, with some late season winter storms. And this really did help to improve river flow forecasts for later this fall and our overall water supply outlook for the community. Latest model runs are showing normal Truckee River flows into the third week of October. There's still a little fluid at this point, but we could see normal flows through October and into early November. And with that, TUMA will be employing standard conservation protocols. This is a 40-year bar graph just showing snowpack in the Truckee River Basin. You can see we have big years, average years, and dry years, and the last 3 have definitely been on the dry side. Next slide. This is a slide similar to what Chris showed. The black line is 2022, and this is the water content of the snowpack. You can see that we got a lot of water in October, the start of the water year, then the bulk of our snowpack occurred in the month of December. And runoff started occurring the third week of March, and we did get that nice little boost in the second, third week of April, which again really did help us from a water supply perspective. For reference, I layered in 2015, which is our driest year on record, and the largest year on record, which was 2017 up above. So a below average year for sure, but could have been a lot worse. In this graph, I want to just illustrate how the water supply forecast evolved through the season. We came into the new year with projections for runoff at Lake Tahoe, 160% of normal, and with no snow for 3 months, quickly evaporated. The forecast degraded, and by the 1st of April, the forecast was below 50% of normal. But with the storms in April, kind of gave us a nice boost. Again, very dry year, but could have been a lot worse. This is a hydrograph of Lake Tahoe elevations, daily elevations for the last 10 years. And the blue line is actual, and the gray is what's projected from yesterday forward. You can see in 2011, Lake Tahoe was just about full. And then we had 4 dry years in a row. Where Lake Tahoe went down and then was actually below its natural rim for about a year in 2015. We had a normal year in 2016, got a little bit of recovery, and then we had the flood in 2017. You could see Lake Tahoe went from below the rim to completely full in one season. Lake Tahoe was full for 3 years in a row until 2020, and then 2021 last year didn't get much runoff into the lake at all, and then projections for this year. Lake Tahoe may come up another inch or 2. But after that, it'll be on the drain again. Lake Tahoe will probably be below its natural rim again by the end of October. This is a hydrograph for flows of the Truckee River at Ferret at the California-Nevada state line. And for reference for this year, you can see we had that significant rainfall in the month of October, where we had some actual localized flooding here in downtown Reno. And then things kind of tamed off. You could see that runoff started occurring in about the third week of March, picked up, and really just peaked the last couple of weeks, but it's definitely on the way down right now. And within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be basically at our baseline summertime flows. So as far as Truckee River flows go through downtown here, we have seen the largest flows already come through on the way down, and summer projections for summer flows are normal. We will have normal river flows through about the third week of October, possibly into early November. This is a map of the Truckee River system. You can see that Lake Tahoe is our largest reservoir on the system. TUMA owns and operates Donner and Independence Lakes. And then at any given point in the year, we do have water being moved around in one of the federal reservoirs or another, Stampede, Boca, and Prosser, and Lake Tahoe. So just for reference, that is a map of our system. TUMA storage, drought storage coming into the summer is actually in the best shape ever since I've been here over 20 years. We currently have over 67,000 acre feet of storage in reserve. between Donner and Independence Lakes. And then what we have in storage in the federal reservoirs, Tahoe, Stampede, Boca, and Prosser under the terms of the Truckee River Operating Agreement. Lake Tahoe's about 24% full right now. Stampede is about 55% full. Boca's 84% full. Prosser's 70% full. And Donner and Independence are both 100% full as of yesterday morning. So with normal river flows projected through basically October, we're not going to be releasing drought reserves this year like we had to last year. Last year in 2021, river flows began to taper off the third week of August, and we had to supplement natural river flows with releases from Lake Tahoe, Donner, and Prosser reservoirs to keep our surface water treatment plants online at Chalk Bluff and Glendale and keep our customers in water. But this year, we won't have to do that. It'll be very similar to 2020 when we basically just are able to divert as much as we need from the Truckee River. We do turn on production wells in the spring to get us through the summertime peaking demand season. But again, no drought reserves required this year. This will be a pretty normal year operationally for us, which means customers will be receiving the same high-quality drinking water that they always do from us, and no worries there. But we will be asking, once again, that customers water responsibly. TUMWA has policies designed to promote water resource sustainability, and really what we focus on is outdoor watering in the spring through the early fall months. We have a suite of demand management programs, I'll call it, tailored around the seasonal outdoor watering habits of our customers. And that's what we're focused on as far as getting customers to conserve and save water. Water conservation is an essential component of our overall water management strategy every year, regardless of the water supply situation.
Mr. Houck, will you repeat that? Because I've had people ask me about this.
Water conservation is an essential component of our overall water management strategy every year.
Every year,
if it's a big year, average
right.
year, or a drought year.
Exactly.
We have conservation programs, in place all year round, actually. Assigned day watering is in place all year round. And that is actually the cornerstone of our water conservation program. And we save tremendous amounts of water. Water use gallons per customer per day have declined 30% over the last 15 years due to our assigned day watering programs. So odd addresses, water on Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, even addresses Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And we're asking customers, as is normal in a year like this, to not water between the hours of 12 and 6, avoid watering when it's windy, and just use what you need and avoid landscape runoff. So just to wrap it up, was our third below average snowpack year in a row. But late season winter storms in mid-April helped to noticeably improve the supply outlook. No drought storage is required this year. Standard conservation protocols in place, asking customers to continue to water on their assigned days and follow no watering hours. And a lot of our upstream storage, I'll give credit to the new Truckee River Operating Agreement. We've basically been able to double our upstream drought reserves with the implementation of that agreement in 2015, which puts us in fantastic shape as we head into the summer months and what is now our third year of the drought.
Okay.
With that, I'll take questions.
I have Vice Chair Hill signed in first.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming to the Fire Board to present on where we are with water and what TUMWA's plans are. I think it's really great for the community to learn. And as you know, the chairman and I are on the TUMWA board, and it's so great to get into those details and learn how we can conserve our water and also ensure that, folks know that we also have room for growth and have done a lot of planning and work. And I just wanted to also say that I took some of your slides to another presentation. I don't know if Andy told you, he gave me some of your slides, and it was really great for folks to hear all the planning work that has gone into the TRO agreement, and there's just a lot of information that the community doesn't know, so I appreciate that, and I thank you for taking this on the road as well. Do you have any information today about the Water Heroes program? Because I just think it's a really exciting program. I I want to make sure folks know how they can get involved, because I think is it neighbors, nominating neighbors who are saving water? Is that what we're doing with that program?
I think it can be anything.
Okay.
I believe we're working with Colo 8. on
Oh,
that,
great.
And they'll be coming out with, if not a weekly, then a bi-weekly, look at what people are doing out there. Tumwa will be giving awards to these people.
That's great. And folks can nominate their neighbors on our website, correct?
I believe so.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That's awesome.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair Hill. I'm very proud of Tumwa. As the Vice Chair mentioned, we serve on the Board of Directors, and I believe Tumwa is one of the best managed water systems, or the Truckee River watershed through Tumwa maybe in the United States. It ranks very, very highly, or very high, and it's really amazing to me how our system, we move things around, nobody knows it, and we call that conjunctive use, where there may be turbidity in the river where Tumwa will stop pulling water out of the river, and they'll start pumping from our wells and our resources there. And then talk to me just briefly, real quickly, about our aquifer storage and recovery. Let's talk about up on the Mount Rose Fan, because I know that's a real critical place for us, and how we've kind of restored
Yeah, sure.
and done some great work up there.
Yeah, so when Tumwa merged with Washoe County Utilities in 2015, we immediately got to work tying in our infrastructure to theirs, a system intertie, so that we could send surface water up there, because historically that area was served exclusively from groundwater alone. And clearly the aquifers showed the result of overpumping. Aquifers were on the decline. And with the system interties Tumwa was able to install, we've been able to rest many of those production wells, and the water tables have improved noticeably over the years. We call that passive recharge,
Okay.
where we're not actively sending water down, but we're arresting the wells, so it's passively, coming back and getting healthy again. In dry years, Tumwa has in the past recharged, or through aquifer storage and recovery, ASR, over 3,000 acre-feet a year. We're only able to do about 1,000 this year, but we are now actively recharging on the Mount Rose Fan at 3 wells up there. We actually started sending treated surface water back in to the production wells to recharge and improve the surface water, or the groundwater tables in that community. So that's one of the things we're doing as far as ASR. And then we typically do ASR through a number of wells throughout the Truckee Meadows for not only water supply, but for water quality purposes.
Right. How about the treatment plant on the Whites Creek treatment plant?
Yeah, it's up and running. It's a 4 million gallon a day plant. We'll be taking water from Whites Creek. It's running right now. We're still doing some testing, on a smaller scale. But by this fall, this winter, it'll be in full-scale operation, and we'll be taking treated surface water from Whites Creek and injecting it through many of the production wells on the Mount Rose Fan as well as just that plant will be helping to meet customer demand for that area on the Mount Rose Fan as well.
So that's basically a 12.25 acre-foot a day treatment plant.
Yes.
4 million gallons.
Yes.
Wow, that's a lot of water.
Yeah, and it was a lot of work, getting that thing
Yes.
online, the engineering and design, the planning, and
Yes.
going through the testing phases here. It was a long time in coming, but it's going to be a nice little plant for us. Anyway, we're looking forward to really being able to use it.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Lucy, I have you signed in next.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Halka, and I appreciate the presentation, and I think it's a prudent conversation to have, especially with Tumwa, but not necessarily in regards to our water supply and our water levels. I know, I believe the Whites Creek Surface Water Station has been online now for 3 years, 2 years now?
No, it just came online in March.
So we're just now collecting that surface water off of those runoffs, and from obviously from the previous presentation from Mr. Smolcom that we have some challenges with, obviously with runoff and what we can collect on those creeks and that surface water to help recharge and supplement. One of the issues, though, I'd like maybe if you or the chairman can take back, or the vice chair, in Holcombe Ranch, there are areas of Holcombe Ranch that we have issues with. We do have fire hydrants out through that area within the unincorporated county, but some of the challenges that we have at some of those fire hydrants is that we don't even have enough service pressure or supply out in those areas, kind of in the outreaching areas, Holcombe Ranch, Lakeside. Those hydrants don't have enough pressure because of the reach and the access from some of the mains. And some of the closest stations are obviously at the base of Foothill Road. And then we also have pump stations up in the Ventana area off of by Arrow Creek. But there's just not enough reach or supply that gets out to those areas. And I'm concerned from a fire standpoint when we run, being that Station 33 supports all, not 33, right? Yes, 33. That supports all those areas back there in conjunction with Reno Fire Department, that some of those hydrants aren't going to have enough adequate pressure for long range. Some of those parcels are quite a ways away from where the hydrant may be. What can we do to increase from a Tumwa standpoint? And maybe that's not a question for you, but hopefully we can talk about, if supply is an issue or pumping's an issue, how do we get adequate supply and adequate pressure to those hydrants in those back areas? It's just something if you could carry that back to Mr. Foray and the chairman, that would be phenomenal. But I know those have been concerns for our county engineers in regards to some of the projects and different things and homes in that area. So I know supply is an issue, but we also have to be able to adequately service those fire hydrants and make sure that we get those fire hydrants maintained when they need them. So.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to have to take that one back. That is not my area of expertise, but I'll certainly take that back.
Yeah, if you could carry that message for me, that would be great. Thank you, Mr. Houck. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lucy. Any other questions for Mr. Houck? Bill, as always, thank you so much. Great information. We'll look into this. Chief, maybe you can help me out with some of the issues in the Holcombe Ranch area with those fire hydrants, and maybe we can get a list going. And I'll work backwards with Tumwa to try to understand what we can do and how we can potentially solve that issue. Okay, Commissioners, that takes us now, and Chief, to item number 7, which is our consent agenda. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know Commissioner Lucy's on a tight timeline. I wanted to ask if you would want to take items out of order, particularly item 14 and 15.
What would you like to do, Mr. Lucy?
Or we could take.
If we could take those 2 items out of order, that would be very helpful for my
which one?
schedule.
I mean, we can do 14, 15, or 16, whichever you prefer.
If we can jump to 14, 15, and 16, and then go back to the regular agenda as drafted, I would appreciate it.
Let's
sir.
go ahead and do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 14 is discussion and direction to staff to prepare a report analyzing critical issues and possible improvements to dispatch, emergency medical services, and fire services based on regional solutions, including centralized dispatch and utilization of closest responsive agency.
All right.
Chief.
Good morning. For the record, Alex Gakulis, Deputy Fire Chief. Chief asked me to help present on this one, so quick overview. This stems from a meeting as referenced in the staff report that occurred back in early April. With a couple of the commissioners as well as mayors, other electeds, managers from the other regional agencies. At that meeting, we discussed a lot of ideas and things that needed focus, and I think it was at Commissioner Lucy's request that each agency come back with some recommendations on what those various regional issues could look like. And so we just wanted to start that conversation now at a very broad level, and it's staff's recommendation that we focus on 3 primary topics and come back with with further recommendations potentially at the next meeting in July. And so we do recognize that this is a regional conversation, so we're putting forth some suggestions and ideas, but with the expectation that the other partners should be representing similar interests too. So with that, those three primary topics that we wanted to focus on and bring back to you at our recommendation. First and foremost is dispatch. It's been a big topic of conversation lately, of course. Without getting into the details too much, because we want to save that for later, but we understand there's certainly struggles from the experience of a 911 caller. They can routinely be passed through multiple PSAPs. That's a product of most people call from cell phones nowadays. If you're traveling Pyramid Highway, for example, you may call 911, land in Sparks's PSAP, even though your emergency is in the county area. That call then needs to get transferred. Those transfers can tie up valuable time. There's also disparate CAD systems among some of the agencies between the primary PSAPs, secondary PSAPs, i.e. REMSA and us. So there's certainly challenges that we know we need to solve. We do believe that the regional CAD system that's going through kind of the final phases of the RFP will be helpful in that, and the timing of that's probably at least still 18 to 24 months out, if not greater. But there's plenty of opportunity to start planning and working towards solutions that can come with that.
So Chief, before you go on, just want to make sure that people know what a PSAP is, a public safety answering point.
Correct. So that's the technical definition. What that basically means is there's primary PSAPs and secondary PSAPs. A primary PSAP is where your 911 call will originate. So when you
Okay.
call, the very first agency that answers is the primary PSAP. A secondary PSAP would be someone like REMSA or NHP, where based on the call type and need,
Right.
that primary PSAP would transfer that caller to then put them through additional screening and resource.
What's your
applications.
emergency?
Yep.
Okay.
So I think that kind of wraps up the broad level focus on the dispatch conversation. Moving to the EMS issue, Commissioner Lucy brought up quite a few of those concerns earlier in the conversations this morning with REMSA and the future of EMS in this region. It really is a systemic approach. You know, there's the REMSA franchise. I think everyone has been having conversations lately about needed changes there and as a system as a whole. Obviously, Truckee Meadows engaged with REMSA and about 18 months ago, we sort of entered into having a primary role in the ambulance transport business and assisting them with that. And so I think we've just scratched the surface of opportunities that can further develop going forward. So whether there's further integrations, full integration of REMSA into some other form. So there's conversations to be had there. So we definitely want to look at that and where those opportunities are. And that includes from, again, the first responder agencies, the transport agencies, as well as the hospitals who are impacted by all those patients that filter through the system. So we bring back further analysis and recommendation on that. And then lastly, the closest responding agency, but that effectively leans to the boundary drops or lack thereof in some cases. We have agreements where we do attempt to send the closest resource on some incident types. Or with certain agencies, but we can expand that further. Obviously, you know, the one focus is us and Reno Fire Department. We don't have fully integrated services there, so that's something we would want to look at. And it can be as simple as policy decisions to send the closest resource and do boundary drops up to and including full regionalization of services. So we want to look at all the impacts of what it would take to initiate any of those things. So that's sort of the three-legged stool that we want to come back with and just have more of a conversation about, and again, hope that the other agencies would want to participate in a similar fashion. So I'll just leave it at that broad level for now and answer any questions or take any direction if you guys want to give us more.
Commissioners.
Chairman, if I may. Thank you. Chairman, I asked for this because this is something that is, as I pointed out in my earlier commissioner comments, is of great concern. And as we continue to talk about the movement of dispatch, as Chief has pointed out, it's challenging when we have, in my opinion, we have two major PSAPs and then two secondary PSAPs, or we have three primary PSAPs, and those PSAPs being Washoe County, Sparks, and Reno, and then you also have two secondary PSAPs being, as the chief pointed out, which would be REMSA, and it's what it becomes is a back and forth, a change, and a delay in not from the need of trying to be efficient, but a delay in just trying to find where the right answer goes to. And I want to use an example that Chief Moore and I have discussed. For example, during wildfire season, if we have overwhelmingly, as we have worked with REMSA to co-locate our dispatch with REMSA, during wildfire season, if there is a wildfire on Peavine Mountain, for example, and it's during rush hour on the way home, multiple people may see that through their car and call that into 911, which ultimately floods our dispatchers and provides them challenges with their ability to really address maybe the other more priority emergencies that need to be addressed, from cardiac arrest to actually home fires that could be going on at the same time. And so what we really need to do, and this has never been an issue about the front lines, this has always been an issue with the electeds and the executive officers in this community not being willing to work together to identify the most efficient way to utilize the tax dollars that we have at our disposal. And it's frustrating to me when we went to the legislature, went through a public process, a vote of the people, secured the funding to build our Regional Emergency Operating Center, also known as the REOC, where we have the ability to co-locate all of our dispatch. Yet we are still in this scenario that we don't want to sit in the sandbox together and play together. And it becomes a driven idea of ego and, in my opinion, power. And no one wants to relinquish power. And ultimately, who suffers at the end of this is the general public, and on both levels, from a cost of expense and a cost of service. And to me, it's frustrating that we, through the meeting that Deputy Chief speaks of in April, that came out of that is that we need to fix dispatch. But I agree, we need to fix dispatch, and it needs to be something that we could address immediately. But to wait 18 to 24 months to make sure that all of our CAD systems are all can work together is an excuse. That there are workarounds. There are many different ways we can do that. In my opinion, there's 1,000 different ways to address this issue. Yet we still run at it in the same kind of manner that we have for the last 8 years. And with that, it's frustrating. And so what I would ask is that not only do we look at dispatch, but we also look at regional EMS and we look at regional fire, and we look at it as a whole. To just address one issue is not really addressing the entire global problem. And the global problem is the ability to service our community in the most effective manner. Whether you drive a red truck, whether you drive a blue and white ambulance, whether you drive, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. We should be able to, the closest vehicle should respond to push an engine to a priority 2 or 3 because we aren't doing our best to analyze. We should better utilize our services and the needs that we need to. And what I would also say is, on the other end of this is that you have the hospitals and the ER departments that are overwhelmed and strained by overwhelmingly times and people that are just sitting there trying to get service from our providers, which takes our fire engines out of their station for a number of periods of time until they can be seen. It takes our REMSA paramedics offline until they can transfer patients to the hospitals, and it all starts with us, and that's the most frustrating part of this. And so I would ask that this board support some sort of direction to our staff that they participate. Now, there has been meetings with the managers, Manager Brown, Manager Coots, and Manager Thornley, yet Our chief, who works directly, who is our employee, has not been involved in those meetings, and I find that disheartening. And I also find that executive director, the CEO of REMSA, has not been part of those meetings either. And to collaboratively work together to find a solution that is fiscally responsible, it is morally the best solution for our community, and that we move forward with some sort of direction to our staff to find and identify a process. Now, Mr. Kuklis has pinned out some suggestions from that April meeting that he's provided to me, but have not been received by the managers because they have chose to conduct those meetings. I would hope that all those listening would allow those types of discussions. I know the Mayor Shivi expressed the same concerns, that she would like to see everybody come back to the table as soon as possible with some sort of solution. Now, I know we have a concurrent meeting scheduled for July to discuss this, but this needs to be moved quickly. And that would be all my comments on this issue going forward, and hopefully that we can get behind that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lucy. Commissioner Jung, I have you signed in next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And now I understand why this agenda item is on here. This is so we can give staff direction for this concurrent meeting. So therefore, we can get votes from all the bodies who are in charge of the chiefs to either publicly endorse these ideas or to publicly say this is not what they want to do. And I think the first way towards this, the CADs, I don't even want to talk about them. So that gets my blood boiling. I've heard this story now for 14 years. So again, I don't believe our fire chiefs are getting direction from the board as a whole, and instead these one-offs are going on, and everybody's doing this, and I'm tired of it. I'm bored. This is a boring conversation because to me it seems like the easiest thing to do in Washoe County would be to say, City of Reno, City of Sparks, Washoe County. Who's going to lead the charge for regionalization? Who's going to make the big boy and girl decisions of what CAD we're going to go to? The end of the world, suddenly this is, and it's been for 15 years, I'm going to tell you. And the other issue is, let's get them on the record, your policymakers who, by the way, I vote for Reno too. I live in Reno. Those of you that live in Sparks, you should be using your ability as a single scary voter to say, drop the boundaries. We're done talking about it. Boundaries drop. This is just saving lives. You guys are talking about water and weather and fire. This is immediate. These are people's loved ones. This is dropping the boundary saves lives. We know that. I don't even need to do the research because the data's been out there since the 50s. So I don't want to get ahead of myself here on this. I think there needs to be more fleshed out, but I think it needs to be, Mr. Chairman and Madam Vice Chairwoman, very clear agenda items for this concurrent meeting that we're hosting and they're calling in. So that the chief knows what his direction is and the whole region knows what other people's directions are and what they consider to be a worthwhile pursuit in a constricted valley with a tax base who do not believe in paying taxes, period, but want these quality of life issues. The only way this is going to be working is boundary drops, uniformity, and fast moving. And listen, 15 years is not fast to this California girl. Not at all. This is a joke. And I think it's because the policy boards, including me, have not been clear, honest. I think I've been honest. I think I have an issue of being too honest. Clear, honest, and black and white. Not this, we're going to try to get the CAD to CADs in 15 years, because that's the hardest thing. I'm not talking about that anymore. The boundary drop is our biggest issue right now. And that has been our biggest issue since pre-divorce. So I think that needs to be very clear on these agenda items. And Mr. Chairman and Madam Vice Chairwoman, please take that back to your counterparts at Sparks and Reno that we're not going to play political football with this anymore in July. And listen, I'm not trying to tell them how to manage their chief, because I have my hands full here. No offense, Mr. Chief, but I do. I'm not trying to tell other people how to do their job or step on the voters who voted for them to do their job. But I think we all deserve, as taxpayers in this community who, heaven forbid, one day will need to call 911, that we have this black and white. This is what we're doing, or this is not what we're doing, and then we march on for there. And we're not going to sweeten the pot for other agencies or any of that nonsense, because ultimately, this is just saving lives. I mean, I don't know. I can't believe people are missing that about the boundary drops. So I'm looking forward to this concurrent meeting, and I'm looking forward to my frustration to be some way, notarized that we want black and white clear answers, and we're not going to be bouncing this ball back and forth, trying and pretending like we don't know what to do. We've known exactly what to do forever in this valley. It's just the political will to do it. And listen, commissioners, I've never known in my years of being up here that cities, counties, and states across the whole nation have more money than they ever will again. So there's no reason why this can't work. Don't tell me it's a resource issue. Thank you.
Okay. By the way, we've had a boundary drop in Sparks forever.
I'm talking about Reno.
Yeah. Sparks in Washoe County, I mean, I see them. Yeah, we need them. I see them in my neighborhood. They're out there. Commissioner Hill, I have you signed in next. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would just say, I think that we are so close in this discussion in many ways because this board moved forward with support for dispatch with REMSA. And I think that has changed the dialogue in the region. And I would just like to follow Commissioner Jung by saying I'm optimistic about this call in July because there are a lot of resources. I think that the region hasn't worked together so well as we have lately on so many items, including homeless services. And I think that as hesitant as I've been on and, really watching what we're doing with dispatch and REMSA and that changeover for the community, making sure that it's the right fit, I think in some ways that has moved this conversation forward. And so I thank the commissioners who really pushed that. And I think that we are going to have a great conversation in July, and we will work with the manager to make sure that we have very specific agenda items as well as options to consider in the staff report, and they're really outlined so we understand what we're going to do when we move forward on these items. And I understand I'm aligned on the boundary drops, but I also think dispatch is that's ripe for opportunity to work regionally, and I think that we can get that done. So thank you for the presentation in the staff report. I was telling the chief I really enjoyed the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lucy, I have you signed in.
Thank you, Chairman. One last thing, too, and to Commissioner Jung's point, I think it needs to be clear and concise exactly what we need to be doing in July. You can hear the frustration in her voice this morning, and she's worked tirelessly on this for as she's pointed out, for 14 years. 14 years is long enough to wait, but I believe that out of this, it should no longer be about the dollar. It should be about the people. It's always been about the dollar, about what we pay and how many crews and all these different things, and I think it's ridiculous that we even have those discussions anymore. It needs to be about the people. So what I would ask the vice chair and the chair to bring back during that concurrent meeting is these 5 tenets. What would an overall governance look like for a regionalization? What would a potential funding structure and how would that look like? What would operations look like? How do we address legislative concerns such as annexation and challenges there, and then just an overall understanding of whether stations exist or don't. But those are the tenets that I believe that are paramount to really moving this discussion forward, because we always just pick one and we never pick them all, and we have to do them collectively. You cannot do this individually, one at a time, and you're just going to slowly kick the can down the road and nothing will get done. We've seen it time and time and time again. And so I'm with Commissioner Jung, I'm with the Vice Chair Hill, that we need to make sure these tenets are all addressed in the concurrent meeting. With TM should be at that meeting as well, and fire professionals understanding what those challenges are, plain and simple. And it has to be public-private partnerships where we're building stations. If we have stations right next to each other, it just doesn't make any sense. We're wasting tax dollars on every level to not provide service at its most optimal level. And we tried to allow, I mean, the legislature got involved in 6 years ago to make it so that we could do automatic aid just for fire. But we've never addressed it. I mean, it's just been ridiculous. We just kind of handpick one thing at a time. And so I, as a commissioner, am tired of having this one-off conversation. We need to have the entire collective conversation. So I'm asking staff to put together those 5 tenets of what exactly we need to do and how we need to work it out and how do we approach it. And I'm happy to carry those bills. I'm happy to introduce those things. I'm happy to do whatever we need to do to get this done. But I'd like to see some serious movement in the next 6 months. We're at June. We had a concurrent meeting a year and a half ago about the health board, and they just now, last month, decided to change the name. So that's how slow things go. And I'm tired of moving slow. As an individual, I don't move at a pace of a snail. I move fast, and I'm now irritated, and I will be doing everything in my power to make sure that we move this continually down the road. And I want to make sure that that is on the record.
Mr. Chair, can I address a couple points?
Please.
I completely agree with everything you guys have said. And I want to be clear, too, that the 3 focuses that we recommended here, while somewhat independent, we recognize that they're interrelated, too. And I fully believe that staff and policymakers can walk and chew gum, and we can work on all these things at the same time. But, I mean, they are different, but they will affect each other at the end of the day. With the focus on dispatch and being that it is so important, I do want to kind of point out a little bit of history here, and a fact that needs to get considered is that this agency, some of us date back to the NDF days that used to serve the western side of Washoe County. We were dispatched by Sierra Front Dispatch out of Minden back then, the federal state dispatch agency. In 2006, when we became Sierra Fire, we contracted with Reno Fire to do our dispatch from 2006 to 2012. Starting in 2012, Washoe County dispatched for us up until last year when we went to REMSA. And I say all that because we've always been in a subcontract relationship. Of all the public safety agencies in this county, we're actually the only public safety agency that doesn't own and operate its own dispatch center. So I say that because it's going to be dependent on the other agencies to work together to solve this problem. As much as we support everything that we're talking about in making those changes, it's not actually the Truckee Meadows board or staff that can do those things. So we recognize that. We just fully want to push forward some recommendations, but that just needs to be considered. On the boundary drop topic conversation, we've talked about it, I think, up here before at past meetings. I fully believe that that's a policy decision. We can do things now. Doesn't need to wait for the new CAD or anything else. The vast majority of our calls that are impacted by these lack of boundary drops in some areas are EMS oriented, whether it's strictly EMS or their vehicle accidents, et cetera. Those calls are going to REMSA now, who happens to be our dispatch center. There's no reason we can't dispatch the closest agency starting tomorrow as soon as the policymaker says do it. So we're prepared to do that as soon as there's concurrence on that. And then lastly, I know that the joint meeting is scheduled, I believe, for July 22nd. It was our intention to bring you back some more detailed points that you've kind of already touched on, but wrap those up for you at the July 5th meeting that then could be carried on to that other meeting. So that was our intentions.
Okay, very good. And commissioners, let's not stick our head in the sand. Some of the issues with respect to boundary drops have had to do with clauses in contracts with exclusive right to serve. So there have been some cases. So that's why we as policymakers have to come together. By the way, that meeting, for those of you who are just watching, is July 22nd. It will be at 1 p.m. It will be here in the chambers. We'll be hosting it. And I look forward to having this conversation. Okay? Anyone else? All right. We will close item 14. Chief, take us into item 15.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 15 is discussion on annexation issues requested by Commissioner Lucy. Done as much research as I can on this, going back to county employees who had been here for the long haul and finding out what the history is. Interestingly enough, TM as a 474 district is the only form of government that cities can take away their revenue base and take away their boundaries to serve. The GIDs, I believe the cities would have to annex the whole GID. Cities can't annex other cities. It's TM, one is really having a detrimental effect through annexation. We're losing revenue over time. We're losing the efficiencies on both sides, both on the city side and the TM side, efficiencies of where we put stations and how we serve the public. I use Station 44 as an example where that used to be purely county area. Now it's completely surrounded by the city of Reno, yet we can't go across the street to serve somebody who's in cardiac arrest or just recently crashed on a motorcycle with severe injuries right at the entrance of our fire station. So annexation is obviously complicated, and I'm not optimistic about working through the regional planning agency. Perhaps you would have more stroke than I would on that, but TM is obviously being affected going forward in the future with decisions on how to place its fire stations to serve its constituents, to spending money through debt financing to place a station where we think we need one, only to see that potentially being annexed away. And it's quite possible, again, as Commissioner Lucy mentioned, that we're building more fire stations than we potentially need. So there's a lot of financial inefficiencies. The one thing where I see regionalization as helping this district, if we were to fully regionalize and there was one fire district that covered Reno, TM, and Sparks, then the annexation issue goes away. Because if there's, just theoretically, if there's one fire district that serves everything, annexation is no longer an issue. You're making decisions based on the best places for fire stations. You're making decisions based on needed service level, based on growth. And none of this really becomes an issue going forward. But obviously, if you go to the legislature, you're putting the legislature potentially in a situation where it has to look at the interests of the city and the interests of the fire district and having to make a balanced decision. But we have a legitimate reason to go to the legislature to say we're being adversely affected and petition the legislature for some relief on that. I say this and not being critical at all. I'm just saying this is the reality. If you look at the city of Reno's deployment of its fire stations, it has one fire station north of 395 and one fire station south of the McCarran Loop. So it has 8 fire stations really inside the McCarran Loop, but a lot of annexed territories outside of that. And to be critical, I would say that perhaps there is no plan on the city's part, both Sparks and Reno, as they expand and they want to annex additional territories. Are they really providing for the ability to service, not only fire, but police and everything else that they have to do? So I wrote this so you really understand from the A to Z of the annexation problem, and staff would be looking for some direction in a multi-pronged approach, perhaps having conversations with the Regional Planning Board, perhaps drafting a bill draft and going to the legislature with something that would help stem the tide of just blanket annexation without regard to how people are going to be served.
So Chief, let me let Commissioner Lucy jump in here because I
Thank
think
you,
he's got to get out.
Chairman, and I apologize for my schedule today. I did not intend to have this back-to-back like this, but this goes hand in hand with the conversation I just had. And annexation, as Chief pointed out, is a necessary evil for counties and cities. We need to continue to allow cities to grow and I want to continue to be a good neighbor to our cities. However, the way that the laws have been drafted in our state, it makes it severely limiting for our fire service, and not only annexation, but sphere of influence. sphere of influence is, in my opinion, is probably one of the most detrimental pieces of legislation that sits on in our NRS that allows for example, south of in Mount Rose, currently just south of the Redfield campus, for UNR, across the street from the Summit Mall, there is we just received an annexation request for about 120 acres from the county into the city for multifamily development and a number of different things that are really going on out there. However, to Chief's point, they have one station south of the McCarran Loop. That's Station 12, located off of Steamboat Parkway. We have stations along Station 36 at Arrow Creek. We have Station 39 up at Joy Lake. We have Station 33 on Foothill Road that can respond just as quickly as Station 12 can if they're in the box. And my point is that this is something that needs to be addressed, whether going back to that full regionalization discussion about how we go about funding a regional fire service and the boundary drops, having the identities of, hey, we're going to annex it, but yet we've done a bad job in this community, unlike other, about planning. 40 years ago, and these are the sins of our forefathers, that we planned, we were just a small town. 40 years ago, we were 100,000 people. We're 500,000 people now. And we are playing catch up every day with infrastructure, not just fire, but water, sewer, you name it. Every issue that we address here at this commission, either at the Fire Commission or the Board of County Commissioners, we address these issues and we're playing catch up. And it is absolutely ridiculous with the amount of growth that we're seeing in our community, and we need it. We've diversified our economy. We have new companies coming in. The cities want to see, this growth. Yet we can't properly service it from a public safety standpoint. We say it right here on our wall. Every time people come to the podium and say, we're here to provide a safe, secure, and healthy community, I don't think we're providing a safe and secure, healthy community when we're fighting about whose land is where and where you're going to get your fire, what firefighter is going to show up at your door, and how they're going to show up, and if they're going to show up, and when they're going to show up. And it's all based upon this dispatch, boundary drop, annexation discussion. So this goes hand in hand with this. And I personally would love to carry a bill to the legislature and testify and show all the tenets of why it isn't functionally working and how we have done a poor job of truly outlining what we need to be doing from regional planning on up. And I'm sorry, regional planning in Washoe County, I know we have 2 members that sit on it, but they have been bullies to what we need to do. And it's provided a challenge where I ran a bill when I first got elected and got my hand slapped because trying to do it. And made a lot of enemies, but we need to go back and really discuss this, because I understand annexation and I hope that the cities continue to grow, but as it pertains to the safe, security, and health of our communities, we need to start looking at this better and take fire out of annexation and make sure in an entire, I'd say one unified fire district, one unified fire fund, regionalized, whatever it takes, let's do it. I'm all for it. And people who say, well, that's more taxes, I disagree with you. I don't think it's more taxes. I think it's going to be more cost efficient and beneficial for communities and everybody involved. And I think you're going to get better service and you're going to get smart planning. And those are my comments, Chairman. I apologize that I have to leave, but that is for the day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. And what I would say, just before I let Commissioner Jung jump in here, the key to this is if we did have, to your point, Commissioner Lucy, a unified fire district, the city of Reno and the city of Sparks could reduce their pro rata share of taxes, what the fire service costs them. They could stop drawing from their general fund. We could go to the legislature, just as we did for TM, ask them for a line item on the tax bill. Their taxes would likely go down because we would not have duplication of services. And right now, today, if you live in the unincorporated area of the county, you know how much you pay for fire. If you live in the city of Reno or the city of Sparks, you have no idea what you pay for fire. You do not know. You don't know because it's a draw from the general fund. Now, you can look at their budget, but you always have to be looking in the rearview mirror, because if things change throughout the cycle, they're going to come back and ask for above base requests, and so that's always kind of an issue for taxpayers. So part of this should be, if we're really talking about this, how do we fund this? And I believe that the general taxpayer, and I say this with all sincerity, will pay less for more service if we can consolidate it, because we're so siloed now. Commissioner Jung, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I've asked the chief, and now I need to put this on the public record so that this can come back. I do believe that we need to make a request of the LCB, which would be the district attorney, to find out if the tax that Washoe County puts on the unincorporated county for fire services, which is plenty. By the way, it was one of my first meetings. The constituents, my board before, nobody was here at the time, wanted to do some nonsense of don't charge the maximum, and they begged us to charge the maximum to provide them fire services. So, this happy government official was like, yeah, let's get it all. But it actually is what kept this fire service going. So let's find out if we can't do that overlay tax over Reno and Sparks. I get what the commissioner is saying, the chairman is saying, because he believes we're at the limit. I think this is different. I want a legal opinion of if Washoe County has the ability to enact this tax across the cities, collect that tax, and then tell the two cities, guess what? It's your best day of your life. You don't have to provide fire anymore. Do you know what city managers, if they're worth anything, would do if somebody said, I'll take 40% of your budget and I'll just take care of it? They would be jumping for joy and also looking for their next raise. But I believe that is something we can do. I want the LCB opinion, and I want it yesterday. The other issue is, if that is not, well, I don't even want to speculate. I need to know black and white. Is this a legal thing to do? Because I think if we could, or look at the GST tax too, Mr. Assistant DA, because I do know we can enact that, and absolutely we can put it to fire. It basically said carte blanche, you can do anything. I know the business or the trade unions try to tell us it can only be roads and that. They're full of it. They don't know how to read a BDR. And I had that from a legislator call me and tell me who should know how to read a BDR. But then maybe pivot there. But I truly believe, more importantly than the cost, is, and here's the other thing, all the firefighters are at par. We made sure of that because we did have that largesse, that there was none of these, they only make this much, and so then we cannot possibly consolidate. Well, now we can. So I think it needs to be an overlay of a tax over the entire county, and leave the cities, hold them harmless, let them run along with their money that they usually hide to pay for fire, which you're right, it's not transparent. It's not a line item for taxpayers. They don't know year to year what they pay for fire, because it's at the will and the whim of the elected body, who are trying to plug holes in a sinking ship back in the day, because we all had no money during the Great Recession. But I think that that's going to be the way forward with that. If not, if those two things don't work, then I think a BDR might be important as well. Going back to Regional Planning Governing Board, which I do not believe in. I'm going to put that right on the record. I don't believe in regional planning. I think that's a board that should be abolished. Nobody hired somebody from Sparks to tell me what to do in D3. Nobody, in terms of voters. And the reason why that we should take a BDR to them is because we have no voice there. If we're the Regional Planning Governing Board is the annexation body that says yes or no if it can annex. That's a ballot that's been stuffed, because we don't have enough people on that board. That shouldn't be going to regional planning. That should come to this gal right here, who is elected to do that, not to the Regional Planning Governing Board if either cities want to annex, because then we could have a transparent conversation and a real true up of how are we going to continue to provide these services that you've promised and they've come to expect. So those are the different tracks that I'd like to go on in terms of making sure that this is sustainable. And and allows the two cities to do what cities do, which is a thriving downtown and great parks and rec and all of those things, not providing the execution of basic government services. That's us. That's the county. We're kind of we're the infrastructure. We're the bare bones of what it means to be government. They get to do all the creative, awesome stuff when they have money. So that's the way I would look at that. For those two prongs. Thank you, Mr. DA, for agreeing to that. I don't know, and you can call me later to tell me that I have really unreasonable expectations, but I would like to have an opinion on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jung. Vice Chair Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I agree with Commissioner Jung, although I am a proponent of regional planning. But I think we have 3 board members sitting here that are on regional planning, and we have our chairman of regional planning as well here. And I think that there's really good conversations we can have. And we actually had at our last regional planning board when we were talking about future agenda items, remember, Mr. Chairman. So I actually think that there could be some work done at regional planning as well. And I don't want to go off the agenda, but I look forward to having those discussions and seeing what we can do, because again, I do think the region is working better together, and I don't think that there is as much of an appetite to do this, especially if we can figure out how we can support the cities in a better way, just like Commissioner Jung was talking about. So thank you.
Thank you. Chief, I'd like some clarification, and maybe from the DA. I thought that the 54 cents per 100 that TM gets, oops, and I thought I turned that off, forgive me. I thought that was legislatively created. And so I'd certainly like to know that. And then of course, you know, the wider discussion is what would a regional amount, because here's the key. 54 cents per 100 works in the unincorporated area of the county because we're not heavily populated and because we don't have a lot of industrial. But when you have, or commercial, but when you have all of those things combined, when you have the 2 municipalities along with the county combined, I genuinely believe that there could be a tax reduction, again, because of just the efficiencies of not duplicating services. So I'd like to see an actuarial. That's all. It's just one of those things where you need somebody to sit down and crunch some numbers and see what it looks like, and how did we because it happened. Commissioner, you were here. Commissioner Jung was here. None of the rest of us were here when the tax was enabled for the creation of TM. So I'd like to better understand that and that authority that we were potentially given, or how it all worked. Chief Moore, I've got you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to echo what you said there, is that if the regional district fire department EMS service is contemplated, that you start with the service level. What's the service level? Because once you understand that, then you can cost it.
Right.
And then you can figure out how to pay for it.
Right.
And then finally figure out how to govern it.
Right. Yeah, and again, it's because of the wide. I mean, we just don't have the density in the unincorporated. I mean, in my neighborhood, you know, we've got 1 dwelling unit per acre, and yet you go, you know, 3/4 of a mile, maybe less, to the south, and you've got 9 to 12 dwelling units per acre in the city of Sparks. So you've got a much higher density that you know you have to serve. So it'll be an interesting conversation. I truly look forward to it. Okay, is there anything else on this agenda item? And we're listed for possible action, but do you think, commissioners, have we given the chief enough direction? Okay, but here's what I'm going to do, because it is listed for possible action. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone signed in for public comment?
We do not.
Okay, all right, I will go ahead and close that. Let's, commissioners, what's your desire? Do you want to move back now to agenda item 7? which is our consent agenda. Let me get back to my,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
okay, let's go back to the consent agenda. Chief, take us back to item number 7, if you would. Let's continue on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 7 is consent items A, B, and C.
Okay? Commissioners, any questions on the consent agenda?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to make a motion.
Please.
Move to approve consent item 7A, B, and C.
Have a motion by Hill, second by Jung. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment on this item?
There is not.
Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Please affirm your votes. And please let the record reflect that Commissioner Lucy had to leave. That takes us now to item number 8. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 8 is the International Association of Firefighters Local 2487 report, and President Pat Walsh is here to present to you.
President Walsh, welcome.
Good morning. For the record, Patrick Walsh, President, Local 2047. I don't have a whole lot for you today, but a couple of the high points. It's been a really busy few months for our executive board with negotiations and all of the changes going on within the district. So I'm happy to say that we had some overwhelming support from our members, and we ratified our contract last week with a 92% yay rating on both the supervisory and non-supervisory contracts. So again, we want to thank the administration for coming to the table and being able to work this thing out prior to the end point and not having to go to impasse or anything else that just drags us out any farther. Secondly, we are happy to announce and very proud that the Reno Rodeo Association has, for the second time, chosen our Truckee Meadows Firefighters Foundation for the 50-50 raffle. So on June 16th, your Truckee Meadows Firefighters will be out selling raffle tickets to the people at the rodeo, trying to raise funds for the foundation. And we'd like to see if anybody who's available to come out and please buy some tickets. It helps our foundation dramatically. Last year, I think we raised $10,500 in one night or within a few hours of selling those raffle tickets. So it's a great thing for the community. It's a great thing for our foundation, and we're really excited about it. Beyond that, I don't really have much else for you. Any questions for me?
I do, President Walsh. Would you tell us what your foundation, what are you doing in the community?
So our foundation originally started back when Captain Bill Winchester was in his accident, and we started this foundation as kind of a charity event for him, so we could pay for some of his medical expenses. And since then, we've carried it forward. We do a lot of different outreach in the public, and primarily we do quite a bit of donations, charitable donations to fallen firefighters or injured firefighters throughout the country. But mostly, if there's any issues here locally, any of our members, current members' families, and also people in the community, if they're in a time of need, we're happy to open up our wallet and provide whatever services we can. I know I was just talking to the president of the foundation yesterday, and he was telling me a story about there was a motor vehicle collision. I'm not sure which district, but Truckee Meadows responded, and she was on her way home from the grocery store with about $300 worth of food. She needed to be transported to the hospital, and the foundation was able to go to her home after she was released from the hospital and replace her entire grocery list, so she didn't have any outstanding debts or any issues to feed her family or herself. So that's kind of the broad stroke, but we're out there in the community trying to make sure that whoever needs help has it.
Wonderful. Commissioners, anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, no questions? All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Have a good
We
day.
appreciate that. Chief, that takes us into item number 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 9 is the fire chief's report. I divided this into discussion items and informational items, but if you do have questions on the info items, I'd be glad to address any questions. Item 1 is the future employee development. Division Chief Joe Shum and I have met with Washoe County School District and also with TMCC. And this, I want to run this by you to make sure that, you probably support this. But we're all challenged in trying to find new employees. And I know Dean Dow is here. He's struggling to look for paramedics. We cast the net. I know Reno and Sparks are challenged to find good employees. There just aren't enough regionally here. So it came to mind that if Washoe County School District wants to develop a fire science program and allow these students to then get college credit and move into TMCC, we could home grow our own employees for the future. So I understand that next semester Washoe County School District will start this program. They'd look to TM and possibly even REMSA or other fire agencies to teach the coursework. They can get college credit, move into TMCC to take fire science, possibly paramedicine, and we can increase the number of good candidates for a hiring pool. It only makes sense that we support this program. You'll see the correspondence that I sent to TMCC, the 10 acres that we own in Spanish Springs. TMCC would like to build a building specifically for fire and EMS training. What a great relationship we could have with our fire station and the TMCC building right there on the same 10 acres. So where I want to go with this is develop this even more and see what kind of traction we can get, but I think it is the way where we can find our employees for the future. So as we grow, no matter what the future looks like for us, we would have a hiring pool that would be sufficient to meet our needs.
So Chief, before you move on, in that training center, are you talking about having a similar training center as in Carson City where you'd have open burns and et cetera?
No. This would be more of a classroom setting.
Okay. Because you'll wig my residents out.
No open burning.
To see plumes of smoke coming from the center of the valley, you'll wig them out.
Nothing like that.
Okay, all right, I just wanted some clarification. Thank you. Proceed, Chief.
If there's no further questions on that, a capital projects update. All the architecture on Station 37 in Hidden Valley is now complete.
Good.
Down your agenda is an approval, as a recommendation to approve the construction on the residence. But as we move into the consolidated station in Apple, Washoe County Capital Projects has told me that they don't have the capacity to do what they need for the county and for us. So in conversations with Mr. Smith, he urged me to go out and find our own capital projects manager, one we would hire from the private sector, to assist us. So I want to let the board know I'm working on that and would bring it back for approval probably in July, because once we hit July, we're off to the races in getting the rest of the architecture done on these projects, getting them costed and figuring out how much we would need to finance. And I don't have the construction experience. I can certainly guide the architects, but we really do need to bring somebody on now to help guide me in making selections on methods and materials of construction, the most efficient way to construct these buildings. So with that, in July, I'll bring back a recommendation for someone that we would hire to help us.
Okay. Commissioner Jung.
Yeah, just to encourage you to make sure that, and I'm sure you're already doing it, but I would feel remiss if I didn't say it, that you are using HR's resources, because HR is out and about at all of these places too, needing, and as you know, trying to grow their own or recruit their own. So I'm sure you're already doing it. You have a line through there, but they set up all these presentations. So lean on them a little bit. I would. And they know how to get in there and they know the channels. But I think it's a great idea, Mr. Chief. And I think it's not the only industry that's going to need to start doing this, because people, thank goodness, this younger generation values a work-life balance, unlike what they inherited from us. So I think we are all going to be in a position of trying to recruit in as much creativity as you can do and using our HR resources. I tip my hat to you and to REMSA to cross-pollinate, which we've always done informally, but formalizing that is great too. I mean, most of our firefighters worked for REMSA. at one point in their career to get the hours and the time and to wait for a great position to open up, because this is a great place to work. This is a great career. You have a lot of bounty here to attract people, and I'm also happy to hear that your firefighters won't work overtime anymore. I love it. That's a work-life balance. We should not be balancing our budgets on overtime. We should be balancing our budgets on people who can work 40 hours a week or less, because that's a healthy, normal, balanced life. So keep going.
Can I sign up for that deal?
Yes. When you retire, sir, I will only call you 40 hours a week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Jung. I owned my own business for years. I didn't even know what a 40-hour week was. Okay. Chief.
Item 3 is, I asked Deputy Chief Dale Way to brief you basically on some big structure fires that have happened nationally in large buildings with sometimes 1 million square feet under roof. We're getting more of these in our district, and I asked Chief Way to draw a correlation between the size of the fire department and the outcome of the fire, because I think the public thinks that the size of your fire department is going to translate into successfully extinguishing some of these fires, and that's not the case. So without stealing any thunder from Chief Way, I'll let him give you a brief presentation on what's been happening.
Chief, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Dale Way, Deputy Fire Chief. As Chief already indicated, and this kind of ties to us starting with the existing buildings that we're going to inspect within the jurisdiction on a regular basis, and our annual permitting, which we charge fees for, that we've already started that now, effective June 1st, and we've actually collected our first fee for service for that. So big box warehouses, there's been a couple, next slide, please. Since 2020, one of the first ones that I became aware of was in Redlands, California. It was an Amazon, third-party Amazon distribution center. More recently are the last 3, which have all occurred within this year. Next slide, please. So in Redlands, California, it's a smaller department, 4 stations, obviously received aid from their neighboring fire departments. Now, that was back June 5th, 2020, so just as COVID was really coming on. It was approximately 600,000 square foot concrete tilt-up. The fire was suspicious in nature. They have not, to my knowledge or in the news, released any suspect arrested for arson. It did appear that the fire protection systems were off at the time. I reached out to them, didn't receive any word back. But the crews there remained on scene for about a week after. Next slide, please. So here's the pictures as it was in progress. And of note, you can see there's 2 ladder trucks up pouring water, much as they can. Roof's already gone. So once it's beyond a certain point of the built-in fire protection, it becomes pointless, right? We're basically just trying to protect the surrounding buildings from any ember cast or, migration of the fire. Next slide, please. So Plainfield, Indiana, this is a Walmart fulfillment center, happened just earlier this year in March. 1.2 million square feet, concrete tilt-up, as they pretty much all are. This was a quote in the article that's listed here that the Plainfield Fire Department chief said that the fire suppression system at the facility was working correctly at the time firefighters arrived. At some point, a decision was made by firefighters to turn off the system to the affected area. They're going to be a little slow to come out with that one. Here's the pictures from that. Well, I didn't even call them because I didn't think that was going to happen. But this is scenes from the incident itself there in Plainfield. And you can see 1 ladder truck, 1 stick in the air, not even touching it. You'd need more than 20, 30 units up doing that to make an effective attack if you could. But at this point, the building's completely involved. Next slide, please. So our more recent one here was San Jose, California, so Home Depot. So we're getting smaller, right? A 98,000 square foot concrete tilt-up. San Jose is a big department, 33 stations, multiple units at a lot of those stations. Again, 98,000 square feet. This was arson. A suspect was arrested who was a former employee. In looking at some of the videos, it did appear that the fire protection systems were offered disabled. Given that it's a former employee, may have had knowledge to do that. This was, for them, a third plus alarm fire, which they say more than 100 firefighters responded to the scene and to neighborhoods behind the store. With 4-person companies, obviously right there, you can just add it up and go, that's more than 25 engines and ladders responded to this smaller fire. And here was the scene that day. So you see a couple of sticks in the air, but you see the whole store is ripping with flames, and there's the burnout thing, and it looks like construction held between the other building there. So, next slide. Last and most recent here was just 2 weeks ago in Spokane. Again, an arson fire, and they have arrested a 59-year-old female. With that, about a 98,000 square foot concrete tilt up. Spokane Fire Department's a good sized department of 16 stations, some with multiple engines and ladders. Fire protection systems here controlled the fire, so we don't know what level of fire protection system they had. A lot of times it's ESFR, so it's a suppression system. It's supposed to suppress it prior to our arrival. Next slide, please. So you can see there's the inside of the store, so we're not looking at the outside of the store, the total destruction of the building. Obviously, they're listing this as several $1 million worth of damage to more than likely mostly product. So hazard and risk, obviously whenever we take one of these on, there's certain inherent risks, right, with these facilities due to fuel loading and storage configurations. As we look at this, not the warehouse distribution, but Home Depot, like all those listed there, Home Depot, Lowe's, Sam's Club, everything else is a typical M occupancy for us now, or a mercantile as defined by the building code. And we walk around in those, all day long. And with that comes a certain element of risk, but there is a higher level of hazardous materials, and obviously you're walking amongst high pile combustible storage. Obviously, they're primarily dependent on built-in fire protection and the inspections conducted to prevent, control, and extinguish fires, in order to protect the jurisdiction's assessed value and community jobs. So really the message from these incidents is that is no fire department, as you can see, even with San Jose being as large as it is and receiving aid from its neighbors, can effectively fight a heavily involved big box warehouse fire and emerge with a significant save. Proper active fire protection systems are imperative to that. And these buildings, again, require proper built-in fire protection and regular annual fire inspections, which is what we're setting out to do.
Okay. Chief, just before I let Commissioner Jung ask her question, tell me, how does someone turn a suppression system off without throwing an alarm, and why isn't it a dual code requirement? So in other words, if I want to, if I'm a bad guy and I'm a disgruntled employee and I want to turn off a system, that when I go in and do it, it requires not only my code, because I have the code, but it also requires Commissioner Jung's code, so that basically you've got a dual authentication.
So it's you're indicating like missile launch, and I don't know that any system is that bulletproof. But what we require are electronically monitored. Okay. Right, they're monitored by the same system that would throw a notification to the central monitoring system.
That it's been turned off.
That it has been turned off. It's a valve, right? This is all plumbing. So this is a manual valve that is turned.
I see.
Right, and generally they're also locked and chained in the open position. Right, yeah. They're only the chain and things are only taken off, and it's put out of service. A service company will call the central station monitoring and say, we're putting this system out of service while we work on it.
Right.
And they have to obviously be someone with a licensed sprinkler company to do that.
Right. No, I understand. I had to do some additions in a building that we were renting, and we had to get the fire service, we had to inform them that we were turning the sprinklers off for a short time. It was, 10 minutes while he hooked up an additional pipe, but.
Correct. And that's, as you normally see, like this one in San Jose, the person was a former employee.
Right.
So that right now, there's no details out about what level
Okay.
of access he had within or to the building or knowledge of.
I just wonder what fail safes there are in those systems, and maybe it's an opportunity to learn, because it's not just one, there's multiples. Commissioner Jung, the floor is yours.
Yeah, relatedly, Mr. Deputy Chief, do you inspect where buildings have?
Is your mic?
Hello? Yeah?
Okay.
It's on. Do you inspect buildings that have or properties that have lots of pallets or tires, those types of
Yes.
raging infernos? You do?
Industrial, commercial, multifamily.
Okay. And even if, and of course, that's in the TM service area.
Yes.
Do you do reactive responses if somebody calls and says, hey, there's a lot of pallets on Chocolate Drive in my district in Sun Valley? Do you respond in that way, or?
We do. After I believe it was last year, remember the fires
Yep.
last year in Sun Valley with the
Yep.
pallet yards? We did. We went through to every pallet yard, and we're still
Okay.
working with a lot of them.
There's a lot.
Being pretty generous with them. It's been quite a while since somebody's come and
I
paid them a
know.
visit and tried to get them back into compliance.
Right.
So, yes,
Okay.
we do.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Vice Chair Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate this presentation because I think folks don't understand how important fire prevention is, and these investments in their buildings, how it's not just on the fire department to put out these fires. They need to invest in their buildings, and that we need to be ever present to make sure that they're not doing things that will create hazards for the whole community. So I really appreciate this, and something that all electeds need to keep in mind when businesses are griping about certain codes or standards that we put in place. It's really for the business, the security of the business for the future, and also the employees and the community at large. So I appreciate this presentation.
To that point, Commissioner, that's exactly what we tell people, is that we are in a sense, we become your housekeeper if you're not keeping house. And we're doing that, obviously, to protect your business and the community interests.
Okay, any other questions for Chief? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Chief, that takes us now to item 9.4.
Say that again, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Well, you have informational items.
I'll let that stand unless there's any questions from commissioners.
Okay, Commissioners, any questions for Chief on item 9.4, 5, 6, or 7? Okay, all right. That, Chief, that takes us to 9B.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item, that is your monthly report,
Okay,
which not included in your packet, but was handed out. And
handed
so
out,
if
yes, I saw that.
there's any questions about
Okay.
that.
Mr. Chairman, do you want a block vote by any chance?
I kind of do, but
Okay.
let's hold on a second here. So to Commissioner Jung's point, Chief, I mean, we're getting upside down with Sparks. Is this a conversation I need to have with the manager this afternoon, or the manager of Sparks and the mayor of Sparks, where we've given them 20 responses versus 2 received?
I think the system's working very well, Mr. Chairman, and Sparks provides us a lot of support in structure fires in Spanish Springs and in
Okay.
Sun Valley. So I think we're still at a level where it's a good quid pro quo, and I'm not too concerned about that math quite
Okay.
yet.
Yeah, I thought we were doing a cumulative as well when we were setting them up.
Yes, sir. I will make sure that gets done next
Okay.
month.
Okay. Any questions for the chief? Okay. All right, so my recommendation for a block vote, do you want me to make you a recommendation? Or
I
would
can
you-
also do one, whatever you would like.
What do you have in mind? Vice Chair?
10, 11, 12, and 13.
Those are my exact ones.
minds, guys.
Okay. Chief, would you read item, so I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion for a block vote of item 10, 11, 12, and 13. So I have a motion and a second. Chief, will you read those items in, and then we'll call for public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 10 is a recommendation to approve 2 collective bargaining agreements between the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District and the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District Firefighters Association, IAFF, Local 2487, supervisor and non-supervisory unit, each for a 2-year term effective July 1, 2022, with a combined approximate increase over the current collective bargaining agreements of $1,704,711 in fiscal year 22-23, and an additional $1,297,980 in fiscal year 23-24, and if approved, authorize the chair to sign on behalf of the board. Item 11 is a recommendation to approve retroactive and continued purchases for needed supplies, materials, equipment, and contractual services from various suppliers that have or will exceed in the aggregate $100,000 during this fiscal year, but will remain within available adopted budget funding. All such purchases will continue to be subject to and in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Purchasing Act. Vendors receiving these additional funds include the following: All-Star Fire Equipment, Interstate Oil Company, Stryker Sales Corporation, Spectrum, Arc Health and Wellness, Harris Corporation, L.N. Curtis, Regional Emergency Medical Services, REMSA, and Zoll Medical Corporation. Amounts to be paid shall not exceed $300,000. The supplies, fuel, materials, equipment, and contractual services to be provided by each include but are not limited to equipment repairs, supplies, broadband services, and personal protective gear. Item 12 is a recommendation to approve the property and liability insurance and workers' compensation insurance proposal for the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District for 1 year beginning July 1, 2022, for a total estimated annual premium of $1,552,697, and authorized purchase of insurance based on the proposal. The proposal includes property, casualty, professional, and excess liability insurance to be provided by VFIS, American Alternative, and will include crime, employee, theft insurance through Travelers Bond and Specialty, network security, privacy, and workers' compensation through 7710 Insurance Company. And finally, item 13 is a recommendation to award a bid and approve an agreement with Houston Smith Construction Incorporated for the Hidden Valley Station number 37 remodel addition project to remodel the residence location at 5355 Pelham Drive for a crew residence in the amount of $493,000.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on any of those items?
We do not.
Okay, we'll close public comment. I will bring it back to the board. We have a motion by Hill, second by Jung. Is there any other discussion or question on those items? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Please affirm your votes.
Oh, sorry. Here we go. Got it.
Okay, very good. All right, Chief, that takes us now to item 16.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The item 16 is a recommendation to accept the 2022 annual performance evaluation of your fire chief. I'll let Carla Arribiaga present the findings, and if you'd like, we could have a discussion about goals and objectives for the next year.
Okay. I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name, Carla. It has vexed me since I started
Me too.
But Carla, you may call me Vaughan, though, just
Okay.
because of that. Take us through this.
So for the record, Carla Ribiaga, HR manager for TM. So following Chief Moore's contract, he has to have his evaluation done every year. I'd give you a full summary of his evaluation, but just to briefly summarize it, we invited 33 individuals to participate in the evaluation. 25 completed it. So that gives us about a 75.75% return rate, which is pretty good. Those invited were the fire commissioners, his direct reports, internal stakeholders, and external stakeholders. And we had several areas that we covered that were dual across all of them. Some of them, like the commissioners, had different areas that they did specifically to the commissioners. But the 4 areas that covered all of them were leadership, work ethic and integrity, communication, and then the overall evaluation. So for his overall evaluation, he came pretty much half-half between exceeds expectations and meets expectations between those 4 groups. It was 48% for 12 of the respondents for exceeds expectations for the overall rating. And then for the meets expectations, he had about a 52%, 13 responded. So that's just a real brief summary of his eval. Did you have any questions you wanted to get?
Okay. Any questions at this time? No, I will tell you, though, this is an interesting scenario. The chief is our direct hire, but yet we've got external stakeholders who are also grading him, and it's a two-edged sword. So I'm going to just say, Chief, I think you've done a great job. This is like balancing plates in a circus act. It's really, there's a lot of stuff up in the air all the time. So I think you, for me personally, you have exceeded my expectations. It's very, very difficult. Do you have any more, Carla?
I do not.
Okay.
Chief
So
Martin.
Commissioners, what's in front of us today is there's the potential for doing a merit increase, but Chief, talk to me briefly. We gave, what did we do for a COLA for the firefighters?
3%.
3%? Okay. And, but I thought we gave them something else.
They get a 3% in July, and then in January, there'll be another 3%.
Okay.
And Chief Moore does get those.
Okay, so you get the automatic COLAs already. Okay? Commissioners? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. I think that our chief has done a great job, and I was looking at reminding myself of the goals and objectives, and I think that those look very good moving forward, and a 5% merit increase sounds great to me. And I really look forward to just the continued effort of regional cooperation, because that's the name of the game. And I think that we are on a really good path, and I look forward to working with the chief and this board on doing that. So, and thank you, Chief Moore, for your dedication to the district and your service.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Jung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree with the Vice Chairwoman Hill. I think 5% is fair, equitable, and reflective of a great performance evaluation. I would encourage you to continue working on relationships with the other players in this sandbox, and a request too that we have more gender equality in these meetings. If you're going to Sparks and meeting, we need a woman in some of these. I think it's a lot of men doing business. And I'm not being sexist. There is a difference between us and where our bottom lines are. And I'm proud of that difference, your strengths and my strengths. So I would just encourage having some of you have a majority female board. So grab one and take them along for these conversations, because I think you'll get a perspective that will help you to navigate some of this, because mostly you deal with men in this field. But I will tell you, I'm proud of you for the collective bargaining agreements coming through with, let's be honest, brass. I mean, sometimes we fight about this. And this has been seamless, and I'm proud of you for that, Mr. Chief. It's not easy to do that. And you came into the lion's den when you first walked into here. This commissioner will admit I was not happy with the divorce or the fire, and you had to take the rancor of that for a lot of years. I'm sorry for that. But in spite of all that, you've stood up a great group. You've brought them to parity in pay, and that's something you and I talked about forever. Just because, no matter how great we are to everybody everywhere, people still have to pay their bills. In a capitalistic society, wage matters. It really does. So I commend you on that, and building up a fire service that I am very proud of. I always talk about us, about TM and how well they do. We have the best, coolest equipment, and all the things that people like to talk about in this service. And it's because of you and you teaching us what a good new fire service needs. And I believe you have the ability to carry this baton and make some big changes here that the constituents, whether they know it or not, would be so deeply grateful because of the life savings and the transparency that we're providing to them with their hard-earned tax dollars that they don't like to pay. So well done. I agree with Commissioner Hill.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Jung. Commissioner Herman, I have you signed in next.
I just wanted to tell the chief that and thank him for being who he is, because whether we become regional or not, it's not going to be his fault, because he's willing to try. And that could be a tough job, but I know he's up to tough jobs. I think we are so fortunate to have you as our chief.
Thank you.
And your record is stellar. And I'd like to even give you more than the 5%, but I would go along with that, knowing that you really deserve more than that. So I'm going to shut up now. And but thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. So let's talk about something else. Chief, when does your contract expire?
The end of this year.
Okay. All right. What's the plan for bringing that back to us, Carla?
Next month,
Next month?
right? Yeah, next month.
Okay. Okay. Very good. All right. So Chief, I've got you signed in. Do you?
Just some closing comments. Thank you for your confidence in me, Commissioners. Those are very nice words, and I take them to heart, and thank you for that. I need to also characterize my job as that of an orchestra conductor, who I've got a lot of great musicians, and we would not get half of what we've gotten done except for my very talented staff. So I need to tip my hat to my deputies, my administrative staff, firefighters on all ranks. They are a talented group of people, and I've got more talent coming up through the line, but that needs to be mentioned, that this is not a one-man show at all. And so thank you to my staff members for supporting me and the great job that they do.
Okay, well done. All right. Before we ask for a motion, Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
No, we do not.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board, looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to
Floor is
see if
yours.
there's, I move to accept the 2022 annual performance evaluation of the Fire Chief Charles Moore, including approval of the goals and objectives moving forward and the 5% merit raise.
Okay, so I have a motion by Hill, second by Jung. We have asked for public comment. Is there any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? I believe motion carries unanimously. Please affirm your votes. Okay. All right, Chief, that now takes us to, let me get back to my agenda. That takes us to item 17. Do we have the need for a closed session?
We have no need for item 17, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. We'll close item 17. That takes us now to our final Commissioners and Fire Chiefs announcements.
I have no additional announcements, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioners, anyone? Commissioner Jung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to let the board know, I know I have announced this before, but I actually brought the document for you to take a look at. I think it's pretty impressive. The Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 9211, as I mentioned before, honored Commissioner Lucy and myself for Commissioner Lucy's hard work at making sure that the poppy sales, that's the only way that the Veterans of Foreign Wars makes money. They give out poppies for a donation. Commissioner Lucy made sure that they did not have to pay any sort of rental space or vendor fee at the air races. And this enabled them, as just a small amount of what they've been able to do with this nonprofit organization, is they do a year-round assistance to veterans in needs and to over 100 local families. So they also are a social service agency taking care of their own and others who happen to show up and help. So I brought the letter, and it is signed by Kenneth Kenny Smith, the commander of Reno Battleborn VFW Post 9211, and I will put this on his desk for him. But I wanted to let you know that Commissioner Lucy is a champion for veterans here in Washoe County and across the country, as is this entire board. I have to say this is why my parents love this board so much, because there's not a single commissioner that won't step up and help whenever we say there's a veterans issue. But this is especially important because he is one of our biggest champions here in the Valley for the veterans of foreign wars, and those patriots and heroes and heroines deeply, deeply respect and admire and are so grateful how much this board is on top of the veterans and their needs. And I love all of you guys for that too, but my parents really love you for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Anyone else? Okay. We will close that. And Chief, I think that takes us to our final item, which is adjournment.
Yes, sir.
Oh, no, whoops, excuse me, public comment.
public
I beg your
comment.
pardon. Do we have any public comment? Forgive me.
No one is signed in.
Wade's going to pull me over. We have asked for public comment. We have no one signed in. We will close public comment and our final item. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.